Commander Vexus Thorian of the Zlorthak Imperial Fleet possessed what he considered to be the most magnificent brain in 7 star systems. This was, coincidentally, also what his mother had told him every day since hatching, though she had never specified whether this was a compliment or a medical diagnosis. "Behold!" he announced to his strategic council, his 4 arms gesturing dramatically at the holographic display floating before them. "The perfect target for our next conquest." The planet rotated slowly in the blue-green light, looking remarkably peaceful and utterly defenseless. Vice Admiral Kloxanina squinted at the data scrolling beside it with her dozen compound eyes, each one focusing independently in that particularly disturbing way that made other species feel like they were being simultaneously judged by a jury of very small, very critical insects. "Sir," she ventured carefully, "the preliminary scans show this is a Class 15 Deathworld. Perhaps we should—" "Nonsense!" Vex Thorian interrupted, waving all 4 arms dismissively. "Look at these readings. Bipedal primates with no natural armor, no venomous stings, no acid sacs. They don't even have proper claws. How dangerous could they possibly be?" Sub-Commander Grizzlethorpe, whose species had evolved from what could best be described as a cross between a jellyfish and a filing cabinet, bobbed nervously in his mobility tank. "But sir, the classification system exists for a reason. Class 15 means some bureaucrat made a typing error," Vexus Thorian snapped. "These creatures live on a planet that's 70% water. They're practically fish. Have you ever met a dangerous fish?" The strategic team exchanged glances, or at least those who had eyes did. Those who communicated through electromagnetic pulses sent out the equivalent of uncomfortable shuffling. "Sir," Kloxanina tried again, "the warning label specifically states extreme hazard. Do not approach without full xenological briefing and hazmat protocols. Maybe we should read the complete file before—" "Complete file?" Vex Thorian laughed, a sound like a garbage disposal trying to process a symphony orchestra. "My dear Kloxanina, we are the Zlorthak. We have conquered 47 worlds using nothing but superior intellect and carefully planned strategic superiority. We don't need to read every tedious detail about some backwater mudball populated by hairless apes." He gestured grandly at the tactical display. "Look at their pathetic technology. They still use combustion engines. They burn fossil fuels. Their most advanced transportation involves sitting inside metal tubes and hurtling through the atmosphere hoping they don't crash. It's adorable." Grizzlethorpe's tentacles writhed with what his species considered the equivalent of a nervous breakdown. "But sir, if they're so primitive, how did they survive on a Class 15 world? The classification suggests environmental hazards that would eliminate most known life forms." "Obviously an administrative error," Vexus Thorian declared triumphantly. "Some intern probably meant to type Class 1, Garden World, and hit the wrong keys. It happens all the time in galactic bureaucracy." The holographic planet continued its serene rotation, looking for all the universe like the most peaceful place anyone could imagine. Fluffy white clouds drifted over blue oceans and green continents. It was, Vexus Thorian thought, like looking at a vacation brochure. "Besides," he continued, warming to his theme, "look at their adorable little cities. All those twinkling lights. They've arranged themselves in convenient population centers for easy processing. They've practically gift-wrapped themselves for conquest." Chief Strategist Blurpington, who resembled nothing so much as a purple mushroom with anxiety disorders, cleared what might generously be called his throat. "Sir, I've been analyzing their communication patterns, and there's something rather ODD about their entertainment broadcasts." "Odd how?" Vexus Thorian asked, though his tone suggested he wasn't particularly interested in the answer. "Well, they seem to have an unusual number of programs about surviving things that should kill them, and they appear to do this for fun. Nonsense, primitive storytelling, mythology, All pre-spaceflight civilizations have silly legends about conquering impossible odds. Vexithorian waved dismissively. Next, you'll be telling me they actually believe these fairy tales. The Strategic Council fell silent. In that silence, the faint hum of the ship's life support systems seemed suddenly very loud, and the peaceful blue planet in the hologram seemed to rotate just a little more ominously. But Vexithorian, magnificent brain and all, was far too busy congratulating himself on identifying such an easy target to notice the growing concern among his officers. "Prepare the fleet," he commanded. "We launch at dawn, or whatever passes for dawn in the cold vacuum of space. This will be the simplest conquest in Zlothak history." What Vexithorian didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the complete file on Earth was over 14,000 pages long, most of it consisting of increasingly frantic warnings from previous reconnaissance missions, all of which had been dismissed as clerical errors by various Zlothak administrators who were absolutely certain they knew better than their own intelligence services. The invasion fleet began powering up their engines, completely unaware that they were about to discover why, in certain corners of the galaxy, the phrase Class 15 Deathworld was whispered in the same tone most species reserved for discussing taxes, root canals, or the complete works of Vogon poetry. As the massive dreadnought Inevitable Triumph prepared for hyperspace jump, technical specialist Quibbleton nervously approached the command deck. Quibbleton had the unfortunate distinction of being the only crew member who had actually attempted to read the Earth file, though he'd only made it through the first 300 pages before suffering what his species called existential cascade failure, essentially a nervous breakdown with jazz hands. "Commander," Quibbleton wheezed through his breathing apparatus, "I really think we should discuss the atmospheric composition reports. Apparently these humans breathe a gas mixture that's 21% oxygen, pure oxygen, sir. That's what we use for rocket fuel." Vexithorian barely glanced up from his tactical displays. "Fascinating, Quibbleton. They're even more primitive than we thought, living in a combustible atmosphere. How have they not accidentally incinerated their entire planet?" That's actually a very good question, sir," Quibbleton replied, his voice taking on that particular tone that suggested someone was about to deliver very bad news while trying to sound optimistic about it. "According to the geological surveys, they've had several mass extinction events, 5 major ones, and they keep coming back, stronger than before. Remarkable resilience for such a primitive species." Vexithorian nodded approvingly. "This just confirms they'll make excellent subjects for our labor colonies. Hardy stock." Cloxanina's compound eyes twitched in a way that her species used to express the concept of impending doom mixed with bureaucratic frustration. "Sir, about their defensive capabilities. The preliminary scans show they have approximately 15,000 nuclear weapons aimed at various points on their own planet." "Nuclear weapons?" Vexithorian perked up with interest, pointing at US. "No, sir. At each other." There was a moment of silence so profound that several crew members later reported hearing the sound of their own hopes and dreams quietly packing their bags and heading for the nearest escape pod. "I'm sorry," Vexithorian said slowly. "Could you repeat that?" "They have nuclear weapons pointed at themselves, sir. Apparently, they built enough to destroy their planet several times over and then spent decades in something called a Cold War where they threatened to use them on each other, but nobody actually did use them because they all agreed it would be, and I quote, a really stupid idea. So they're intelligent enough to build world-ending weapons, but wise enough not to use them?" Vexithorian asked, a slight note of confusion creeping into his voice. "Well, sir, that's where it gets complicated," Quibbleton interjected, consulting his datapad with the expression of someone who had just discovered that reality was significantly more absurd than he had previously calculated. "They did use them, twice, on themselves, in something called World War II, And then they decided it was such a terrible idea that they made laws about not doing it again. Laws that they actually follow? Vex Thorian was beginning to sound less confident. Mostly, sir, though they do occasionally drop them on uninhabited islands to see what happens. For science, apparently. Vice Admiral Kloxanina was now displaying the full spectrum of compound eye movements that indicated severe psychological distress. Sir, there's more. According to the cultural analysis, these humans have something called extreme sports. They voluntarily jump off tall structures with nothing but a rope attached to their legs. For fun. That's actually rather ingenious, Vex Thorian brightened. A form of natural selection. The stupid ones eliminate themselves. No, sir, Quibbleton said quietly. They do it because it's dangerous. The more dangerous it is, the more they enjoy it. They have competitions to see who can do the most dangerous thing in the most dangerous way. The command deck fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems and the sound of Commander Vexus Thorian's magnificent brain slowly recalibrating its assessment of the situation. "Prepare for hyperspace jump," he finally ordered, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. We'll figure out the rest when we get there." Boom! As the Zlortic fleet vanished into hyperspace, a small automated monitoring station in the outer solar system detected their passage and dutifully recorded it in its log. The log entry was automatically filed under unidentified objects and forwarded to a government database where it would eventually be processed by a clerk who would assume it was either a meteor shower or someone's elaborate prank. Meanwhile, on Earth, completely unaware that they were about to receive visitors, humanity continued doing what humanity did best, surviving things that should have killed them and calling it Tuesday. The Zlorthak fleet emerged from hyperspace precisely where Vexithorian had calculated they would, directly above Earth's largest ocean during what the locals called hurricane season. This timing was purely coincidental, though future xenobiologists would argue that the universe has a peculiar sense of humor about these things. The first indication that something had gone spectacularly wrong came when the fleet's navigation officer, a nervous creature named Blimpsworth, who resembled a cross between a calculator and a very anxious squid, announced in a voice that cracked across 3 different octaves, "Sir, the atmospheric conditions are unusual." Through the viewports of the inevitable triumph, sheets of rain lashed against the transparent aluminum with the enthusiasm of someone trying to break down a door using nothing but liquid fury. Lightning crackled across the sky in patterns that seemed specifically designed to make visiting aliens question their life choices. "It's just weather," Vexithorian declared, though he had to shout to be heard over the sound of wind that was apparently strong enough to make a starship designed to withstand cosmic radiation shake like a leaf in a blender. How bad could it possibly be? The answer came 30 seconds later when Chief Engineer Grumbleton rushed onto the bridge, his usually pristine uniform smoking slightly and his left antenna bent at an angle that suggested recent intimate contact with high-voltage electricity. "Commander!" Grumbleton wheezed. "We have a problem. The hull plating is dissolving." "Dissolving?" Vexithorian's confidence wavered like a candle in a hurricane, which, given their current situation, was remarkably appropriate. "That's impossible. Our ships are built from military-grade magnesium alloy. Nothing can dissolve that." "Apparently salt water can," Grumbleton replied, consulting his damage reports with the expression of someone who had just discovered that reality was actively conspiring against him. "This planet's oceans contain sodium chloride in concentrations that are eating through our hull like acid. Who builds an ocean out of corrosive chemicals?" Before Vexthorian could formulate an answer that didn't involve admitting he might have made a tactical error, sensor operator Quizzleton announced in a voice pitched somewhere between panic and hysteria, "Sir, we're being approached by indigenous craft, 3 of them, bearing directly toward our position." "Finally!" Vexthorian. exclaimed, seizing on this as a return to familiar territory. Primitive vessels coming to surrender. Prepare the translation matrices. Ready the intimidation protocols. This is more like it. Through the storm-lashed viewport, 3 small boats became visible, bouncing across the waves, with the casual confidence of objects that had no business surviving in conditions that were currently trying to dissolve an advanced starship. The boats were clearly primitive. No energy shields, no gravitational stabilizers, just simple hulls made of what appeared to be metal and fiberglass, powered by what the Zlorthak sensors identified as internal combustion engines that were older than some civilizations. "Sir," Kloxanina reported, her compound eyes swiveling independently as she tried to make sense of the sensor readings. "The occupants of those vessels appear to be fishing." "Fishing?" Vexithorian repeated. "In this weather?" "Yes, sir. They have nets deployed and everything. The lead vessel is broadcasting on primitive radio frequencies. I believe they're trying to communicate with us." "Excellent. Put them through." The bridge speakers crackled to life, filled with static and the sound of wind, but through it came a distinctly human voice, speaking in what the translation matrix identified as Portuguese, with a regional accent that suggested either Brazil or someone doing a very good impression of Brazil. "Oi, you guys okay up there? Your boat doesn't look so good in this weather. You need help?" The bridge fell silent except for the sound of rain trying to dissolve their ship and the gentle hum of translation matrices having what could only be described as a minor nervous breakdown. Vexithorian began slowly, "Did they just offer to help us?" "I believe so, sir," Kloxanina confirmed, her voice carrying the tone of someone who was beginning to suspect that the universe was significantly stranger than advertised. "The lead vessel's captain appears to be named Captain Mauricio Santos, and he's asking if we need assistance with our fancy submarine." "Submarine?" Technical specialist Quibbleton looked up from his frantically beeping instruments. "Sir, I think they believe we're some kind of underwater vessel that has surfaced." "But we're clearly a starship," Vexithorian protested. "We have visible engines, energy signatures. We're obviously extraterrestrial." "Sir," sensor operator Quizzleton interjected nervously, "according to the cultural database, these humans have something called movies, where they create fictional scenarios for entertainment. The captain appears to think we're filming something called a science fiction movie, and that the storm effects are really impressive, but probably dangerous for the actors." Captain Santos's voice crackled through the speakers again. "Hey, movie people! This storm is getting worse. You should get your actors inside before someone gets hurt. We've got hot coffee and cachaça." "What?" Vexithorian asked in a voice that suggested his magnificent brain was beginning to encounter processing errors. "Is cachaça?" According to the cultural database, Quibbleton consulted his rapidly scrolling datapad. "It's a distilled alcoholic beverage made from fermented sugarcane, juice that humans consume voluntarily, despite the fact that it's technically a mild poison." "They drink poison for fun?" "Apparently so, sir. The database indicates they have thousands of different recreational poisons, and they rate them based on how much they enjoy the experience of being mildly poisoned." Through the viewport, Captain Santos's fishing boat rode another massive wave, with the casual ease of something that had been designed by people who understood that the ocean was trying to kill them, and had decided to make the best of it. The boat's lights cut through the storm like beacons of stubborn human optimism in the face of overwhelming meteorological hostility. "Sir," Grumbleton's voice came through the intercom with the tone of someone delivering very bad news while trying not to sound like he was panicking. "The hull breach is expanding. We need to make emergency repairs, but we can't do them in these atmospheric conditions." Captain Santos's voice returned, cheerful and completely undaunted by the fact that he was having a casual conversation during what appeared to be a Category 4 hurricane. "Listen, movie guys, there's a calm spot about 2 kilometers south. Follow us. We'll guide you to shelter." Vexithorian looked around his bridge at his crew of highly trained military specialists, all of whom were staring back at him with expressions that suggested they were collectively wondering how they had ended up in a situation where their best hope for survival was following a primitive fishing boat captained by someone who thought they were making a movie. "Follow them," he ordered quietly. As the mighty Zlothak warship limped through the storm behind 3 small fishing boats, Vexithorian began to suspect that perhaps there was more to this Class 15 Deathworld designation than simple clerical error. The humans, meanwhile, continued to display the casual competence of people who considered navigating through conditions that could dissolve alien spacecraft to be roughly equivalent to a Tuesday afternoon outing. The sheltered cove that Captain Santos led them to was, in Vexithorian's opinion, a perfect example of why his invasion was destined for success. It was small, primitive, and populated by exactly the sort of defenseless fishing village that made conquest practically effortless. Wooden houses, simple docks, and not a single defensive installation in sight. What Vexithorian failed to notice was that this defenseless fishing village had survived approximately 400 years of hurricanes, tsunamis, and various other meteorological tantrums that would have flattened most galactic civilizations. The houses weren't just wooden, they were built by people whose great-great-grandparents had learned the hard way how to construct buildings that could flex with 100-mile-per-hour winds and still be standing when morning came. "Excellent tactical position," Vexithorian announced as the inevitable triumph settled into the harbor with all the grace of a wounded space whale. "Now we demonstrate our superior technology and demand their immediate surrender." Chief Weapons Officer Blastington, whose species had evolved from what could best be described as a military-grade mushroom with anger management issues, consulted his tactical displays with growing confusion. "Sir, I'm having trouble targeting their... well, anything really. Should I aim for their defensive structures? Those wooden shacks, hardly worth the ammunition. Target their leadership center." "Which building would that be, sir?" Vexithorian peered through the viewport at the collection of weathered buildings, fishing nets, and what appeared to be a small bar with Christmas lights strung around it, despite the fact that it was nowhere near December. "Obviously the largest structure, that one with all the illumination." "You mean the cantina, sir?" "Cantina?" According to the cultural database, it's called Bar du Pescador, and it appears to serve fermented beverages and something called fish stew, which... Blastington paused to consult his readings, "which the locals consider a delicacy, despite the fact that it contains enough sodium to preserve a corpse and enough spices to qualify as a chemical weapon under 17 different galactic conventions." Before Vexithorian could respond, his communications officer announced, "Sir, we're receiving multiple transmission requests from the surface. Captain Santos is asking if we need medical assistance, and someone called Donna Beatriz wants to know if we're hungry." "Perfect!" Vexithorian exclaimed, his confidence returning. "They're already offering tribute. Accept the communications. It's time to announce our demands." The main screen flickered to life, showing the weathered face of Captain Santos, who was now standing on the dock wearing what appeared to be a bright yellow raincoat and the sort of grin that suggested he found the entire situation delightfully entertaining. "Oi, welcome to Porto das Tempestades," Santos called cheerfully. "That's quite a boat you've got there. Very futuristic. The special effects are incredible. How many people you got on that thing?" "I am Commander Vexithorian of the Zlothak Imperial Fleet," Vexithorian announced, drawing himself up to his full height and spreading all 4 arms in what he considered a properly intimidating pose. "I demand the immediate surrender of this planet and all its inhabitants." Captain Santos blinked once, then burst into laughter that was so genuine and delighted that several Zlothak crew members found themselves wondering if they'd somehow misunderstood the nature of military conquest. "Ah, very good, very dramatic. You're really committed to the role," Santos applauded. "But seriously, you guys must be freezing in there. Donna Beatrice has already started making extra stew. Come on down, bring your whole crew. This is not a performance, Vexithorian sputtered. We are conducting a military invasion. Sure, Santos nodded agreeably. Very convincing, but the storm's getting worse, and that fancy submarine of yours doesn't look too stable. Better to continue filming tomorrow when the weather clears up? Sub-Commander Grizzlethorpe bobbed frantically in his mobility tank. Sir, he's not taking us seriously. Should we demonstrate our weapon systems? Excellent idea. Vexthorian turned to his weapons officer. Blastington, fire a warning shot. Something impressive but harmless. Show them our technological superiority. Aye, sir. Targeting that small rocky outcropping. Firing plasma cannon in 3, 2, 1... The plasma bolt streaked through the rain-soaked air with a brilliant flash of energy that should have vaporized the target and left a smoking crater that would terrorize the primitive natives into immediate submission. Instead, the bolt struck the water just short of the rocks and immediately fizzled out with a sound like a disappointed balloon. Sir, Blastington reported in a voice that suggested he was having a crisis of professional identity, the plasma bolt was neutralized by the atmospheric moisture. The rain is apparently conductive enough to disperse our energy weapons. Captain Santos, meanwhile, was nodding approvingly. Wow, those effects look really expensive, but maybe not the best idea in a thunderstorm, eh? Lightning and all that. As if summoned by his words, a massive bolt of natural lightning crashed down from the storm clouds, striking the water near the Zlortak ship with enough energy to power a small city. The thunder that followed was so loud it rattled the alien vessel's hull and made several crew members wonder if they were perhaps in the wrong line of work. Vexthorian asked slowly, did this planet just demonstrate a more powerful weapon than our plasma cannons? It appears so, sir. Sensor Operator Quizzleton confirmed nervously. The atmospheric electrical discharge registered at approximately 40 billion watts. That's more than our main guns. And according to the meteorological data, technical specialist Quibbleton added helpfully, this planet generates approximately 45 million lightning strikes per day. Naturally, without any technological assistance. Through the communication screen, Captain Santos was waving toward the shore. Come on! The lightning's getting worse. Donna Beatrice is already setting extra places at the table. She makes the best fish stew in 3 states. You can't miss it. The mention of food had awakened something in the Zlortak crew that their military training had not prepared them for. Curiosity about local cuisine. After months of standard military rations that tasted like disappointment flavored with regret, the prospect of actual food was almost irresistible. Sir, Cloxanina ventured carefully, perhaps we should accept their invitation? For reconnaissance purposes, of course. We need to study their culture before we can effectively conquer them. Vexithorian considered this. On one hand, accepting hospitality from people you were planning to subjugate seemed tactically questionable. On the other hand, his magnificent brain was beginning to suspect that standard conquest protocols might not be entirely applicable to a planet that could dissolve their ships with rain and outgun them with weather. Very well, he decided. We'll send a small diplomatic team for intelligence gathering, but we maintain our position of strength. Of course, sir, Cloxnina agreed. Should we bring weapons? Absolutely, but perhaps not the ones that don't work in the rain. Hooray! As the Zlortak prepared their first face-to-face encounter with humanity, none of them suspected that they were about to discover why the most feared phrase in several galactic languages wasn't "resistance is futile" or "surrender or die," but rather, "come in, you must be hungry." The universe, meanwhile, continued to demonstrate its peculiar sense of timing by sending another lightning bolt close enough to the alien ship to remind everyone present that Earth didn't need weapons to be dangerous. It just needed to be itself. The diplomatic shuttle that emerged from the inevitable triumph looked exactly like what it was, a sleek, advanced piece of technology designed to inspire awe and demonstrate superiority. It had gleaming hull plating, sophisticated energy shields, and weapon systems that could level a city block. What it didn't have, as the crew discovered 30 seconds into their descent, was any defense against seagulls. The first bird strike occurred when pilot Flutterworth was still congratulating himself on the smoothness of his atmospheric entry. The seagull, apparently offended by the shuttle's presumptuous invasion of its airspace, expressed its displeasure by flying directly into the starboard engine intake with the dedication of a kamikaze pilot, and roughly the same effect on sophisticated machinery. "What was that?" demanded Vice Admiral Kloxanina, her compound eyes swiveling in directions that violated several laws of physics and good taste. "According to sensors," Flutterworth replied, with the tone of someone whose training had not covered this particular scenario, "we've been attacked by a small flying creature with a brain the size of a walnut and absolutely no sense of self-preservation. One creature disabled our engine." "Apparently so, ma'am. It appears to have gummed up the intake manifold with its organic components." Through the shuttle's viewports, more seagulls circled with the sort of aggressive curiosity that suggested they were considering whether this strange new object might be edible, territorially challenging, or both. Their cries filled the air with sounds that the translation matrix interpreted as variations on "mine, mine, mine," which, while accurate, didn't really capture the existential threat they represented to advanced aerospace engineering. The shuttle limped to the dock with one engine smoking and the other making sounds like a mechanical asthma attack. As the landing ramp lowered, Commander Vex Thorian emerged, wearing his finest ceremonial armor and carrying a translation device that had cost more than most planets' annual defense budgets. He was greeted by Captain Santos, who was still wearing his bright yellow raincoat, and an elderly woman who could only be Grandma Beatrice. She stood barely 5 feet tall, wore a flower-print apron over practical clothes, and carried a wooden spoon that she wielded with the casual authority of someone who had been settling disputes with kitchen utensils for the better part of 70 years. "Welcome," Santos called cheerfully. "You guys really commit to the special effects. That smoking engine looks incredibly realistic." Vex Thorian drew himself up to his full, imposing height, spread all 4 arms in what he considered a properly terrifying display, and activated his translation device. "I am Commander Vexus Thorian of the Zlorthak Imperial Fleet. This planet is now under our dominion. You will submit to our authority or face the consequences." Grandma Beatrice looked him up and down with the expression of someone evaluating a particularly peculiar vegetable at the market. Then she stepped forward, and before anyone could react, reached up and rapped him smartly on the head with her wooden spoon. The sound echoed across the dock like a gavel in a courtroom. "Stop yelling," she said in heavily accented English that the translation device rendered as "cease your aggressive vocalizations. You scare the fish, and take off those wet boots before you come in my house." The silence that followed was so complete that several crew members later reported hearing their own careers quietly dying of embarrassment. Vex Thorian stood frozen, all 4 arms still spread in his intimidation pose, staring down at a human grandmother who had just disciplined him like a misbehaving child and was now looking at him expectantly, as if waiting for him to comply. "Did," he began slowly, "did she just hit you with a kitchen utensil?" "Yes, sir," confirmed Subcommander Grizzlethorpe from behind the safety of his mobility tank. Should we call for backup?" "She's unarmed," Vexus Thorian protested, though his voice lacked conviction. "She's a primitive native with no technology beyond basic cooking implements." "That cooking implement just successfully neutralized our commanding officer," Kloxanina observed. "Perhaps we should reassess our tactical assumptions." Grandma Beatrice, apparently satisfied that she had made her point about proper indoor etiquette, turned to Captain Santos. "Now, how many for dinner? I count 6 aliens, plus your crew. Better make extra rice." They're not actually aliens, Grandma Beatrice, Santos explained patiently. They're actors, making a movie. Very good costumes, though. Grandma Beatrice studied the Zlothak delegation with the critical eye of someone who had raised 8 children and could spot nonsense from 3 villages away. Actors, eh? Then why does that one smell like spaceship fuel, and why is his breathing apparatus leaking that green fluid? The question hung in the air like smoke from a malfunctioning engine, which coincidentally was also hanging in the air thanks to their damaged shuttle. Santos paused, looking more closely at the delegation. That's actually a very good question. Technical specialist Quibbleton chose this moment to have what his species called a truth cascade malfunction, essentially a nervous breakdown that manifested as compulsive honesty. "We're not actors," he blurted out. "We're actual extraterrestrials conducting a military invasion. But your planet keeps trying to kill us. First the salt water, then the lightning, then the flying creatures with suicidal tendencies. How do you survive here?" The dock fell silent, except for the sound of rain, the distant rumble of thunder, and the gentle plop of Quibbleton's career prospects hitting the water. Captain Santos and Donna Beatrice exchanged a look that contained entire conversations about the relative sanity of their unexpected guests. "So," Santos said slowly, "you're telling me you're actual space aliens who came here to invade our planet, but you're having trouble with the weather." "And seagulls," Flutterworth added helpfully. "Don't forget the seagulls." "And my wooden spoon," Donna Beatrice noted with satisfaction. Vexthorian looked around at his elite invasion force, who were currently being evaluated by 2 humans with the sort of patient concern usually reserved for lost tourists or confused children. "This is not how invasions are supposed to proceed." "How do invasions usually work?" Santos asked with genuine curiosity. "Well, we arrive. We demonstrate our superior technology. The primitive natives flee in terror, and then they surrender unconditionally." "Ah," Donna Beatrice nodded understandingly. "But you see, we're not primitive natives. We're Brazilians. We don't flee from anything, especially not during dinner time. Now, are you coming inside, or do I need to use my spoon again?" The wooden spoon twitched meaningfully in her hand, and Commander Vexithorian discovered that his magnificent brain had suddenly developed an entirely new category of tactical assessment, labeled elderly human females with kitchen utensils. Threat level unknown, but probably significant. Perhaps," he said carefully, "we could discuss terms over this stew you mentioned." "Now you're talking sense," Grandma Beatrice beamed. "Santos, help them with their equipment. And someone do something about that smoking flying machine before it scares away all the fish." As the most feared invasion force in 3 star systems meekly followed a 70-year-old grandmother toward a small restaurant that smelled of garlic and hope, the universe took a moment to appreciate the cosmic irony of the situation. Somewhere in the distance, another seagull cried, "Mine!" at the storm clouds, apparently claiming credit for the entire affair. The interior of Fisherman's Bar was exactly what Vexithorian had expected from a primitive establishment. Wooden tables, simple lighting, and walls decorated with what appeared to be photographs of humans holding dead fish with expressions of inexplicable pride. What he hadn't expected was the immediate assault on his olfactory systems by smells that made his species equivalent of taste buds wake up and demand immediate investigation. "Sit, sit!" Grandma Beatrice commanded, pointing toward a table that had clearly been hastily enlarged by the addition of several chairs of questionable structural integrity. "You're all too skinny. When was the last time you ate proper food?" "We consume standard military rations," Vexthorian replied automatically, settling into a chair that creaked ominously under his weight. "Nutritionally complete, efficiently processed, and optimized for—" "Terrible," Grandma Beatrice interrupted, throwing her hands up in a gesture that somehow conveyed decades of experience with stubborn males who didn't know what was good for them. No wonder you look so sad. Santos, bring the good rum. These poor creatures need proper medicine." Before anyone could object, she had disappeared into what the Zlothak assumed was a food preparation area, leaving them alone with Captain Santos, who was studying them with the sort of interested curiosity usually reserved for unusual but potentially valuable specimens. "So," Santos said conversationally, pouring clear liquid from a bottle into small glasses, "space aliens, eh? How's that working out for you?" "It was working out fine until we encountered this planet," Vexithorian protested. "We've successfully conquered 47 worlds using standard protocols, but nothing here makes sense. Your technology is primitive, your defenses are non-existent, but somehow everything we try fails." "Ah, yes," Santos nodded sagely. "That sounds like Earth, all right. Very stubborn planet. Doesn't like to cooperate with anyone's plans. Here, try this." He pushed the small glasses toward the alien delegation. The liquid inside was perfectly clear and smelled like something that could probably power a small engine or strip paint from a hull. "What is it?" Kloxanina asked suspiciously, her compound eyes focusing on the glass from multiple angles simultaneously. "Rum. Very good for shock and confusion and existential crises about the nature of reality." Maz Subcommander Grizzlethorpe bubbled nervously in his mobility tank. "Is it safe for our species to consume?" "Well," Santos considered this seriously, "it's not really safe for humans to consume, but we do it anyway. Builds character." Technical specialist Quibbleton, who was still in the throes of his truth cascade malfunction, picked up a glass and examined it with scientific curiosity. "Our medical databases indicate that ethanol is a mild neurotoxin that impairs cognitive function and motor coordination." "Exactly," Santos grinned. "That's the whole point. Sometimes you need your brain to slow down a little so you can think clearly." The statement was so fundamentally paradoxical that several Zlothak brains briefly shut down to avoid processing it. "But why would you deliberately impair your mental faculties?" Vexithorian demanded. "Because sometimes," Santos explained, with the patience of someone who had clearly had this conversation before, "reality is too weird to handle sober. Like right now, for instance. I'm having drinks with space aliens who are complaining about our weather. Without a little cachaça, I might start thinking this is strange." Before Vexithorian could formulate a response that didn't involve questioning the fundamental nature of human logic, Grandma Beatrice returned carrying a pot that seemed far too large for any reasonable number of diners. The aroma that preceded her was so complex and appealing that it made the Zlothak delegation's digestive systems activate in ways that their military training had not prepared them for. "Fish stew!" she announced triumphantly, beginning to ladle portions into bowls that could have doubled as small bathtubs. "Fresh, caught this morning, with vegetables from my garden, and enough spice to wake up your ancestors." The bowl that appeared in front of Vexithorian contained what looked like a small ocean of broth filled with chunks of fish, vegetables he couldn't identify, and floating spices that seemed to shimmer with their own internal heat. It smelled like everything he had never known he wanted to eat. "Careful," Santos warned cheerfully. "Donna Beatrice doesn't believe in bland food. She thinks if your food doesn't fight back a little, it's not worth eating." Vexithorian lifted a spoonful cautiously and took what he intended to be a small, analytical taste. The explosion of flavor that followed was unlike anything in his experience. It started as warmth, progressed through various stages of complexity that his brain couldn't properly categorize, and ended with a sensation that could best be described as enthusiastic burning, that spread from his mouth to parts of his anatomy he hadn't known were capable of experiencing temperature. "Hot!" he gasped, reaching desperately for the glass of cachaça. "Of course it's hot!" Grandma Beatrice looked pleased. "Food should have personality. Now eat more before it gets cold." The rum, which Santos had correctly identified as a solution to existential confusion, immediately made the burning sensation more manageable, while simultaneously convincing Vexithorian that perhaps questioning the logical consistency of human behavior was less important than exploring the remarkable complexity of the stew. Around the table, his crew was having similar revelations. Gloxinina was making small sounds of appreciation that her species usually reserved for successful military victories. Grizzlethorpe had somehow managed to get stew into his mobility tank and was experiencing what appeared to be the aquatic equivalent of euphoria. Even Quibbleton had temporarily stopped his compulsive truth-telling in favor of focused consumption. "This is," Vexithorian began, then paused to take another spoonful. "This is actually quite remarkable. How do you achieve such complex flavor profiles with primitive cooking technology?" "Secret ingredient," Grandma Beatrice winked. "Love and enough garlic to kill a vampire." "What's a vampire?" Gloxinina asked. "Mythological creature that drinks blood and can't tolerate garlic," Santos explained. "Probably fictional, but we use enough garlic to kill them anyway, just in case." "You season your food with substances specifically designed to eliminate fictional threats?" "Sure, why not? Better safe than sorry." The logic was so thoroughly human that Vexithorian's magnificent brain briefly considered filing a formal complaint with the universe about the fundamental unreasonableness of this species. "Tell me," he said instead, "how do you survive on this planet? Everything here seems designed to kill you." "Oh, it is," Santos agreed cheerfully. "Hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, droughts, poisonous animals, disease-carrying insects, volcanoes, tsunamis, and politicians. But you know what? We survive anyway. Sometimes we even throw parties during disasters." "You celebrate natural catastrophes?" "Well, not exactly celebrate," Santos clarified. "More like we acknowledge that terrible things are going to happen whether we worry about them or not. So we might as well have good food and good company while we deal with them." Donna Beatriz nodded approvingly. "Life is too short to spend it being scared of everything that might kill you, especially when there are so many things that will kill you if you give them the chance." The profound acceptance of mortality combined with stubborn optimism was so fundamentally alien to Zlothak, thinking that Vexithorian began to suspect he was encountering something far more dangerous than superior technology or military might. He was encountering a species that had looked at a universe trying to kill them and decided to respond with fish stew and fermented sugarcane. "Besides," Santos added, refilling their glasses, "being afraid of everything is exhausting. Much easier to just assume you'll probably survive and get on with enjoying yourself." As Vexithorian contemplated this philosophy while consuming what was undoubtedly the best meal of his military career, he began to understand why the complete file on Earth was 14,000 pages long. It wasn't because humans were technologically advanced or militarily powerful. It was because they were completely, utterly, and perhaps dangerously unreasonable, and they made excellent stew. The revelation that Earth's true danger lay not in weapons, but in the fundamental unreasonableness of its inhabitants, might have been the end of most invasion stories. For the Zlothak, however, it marked the beginning of what Vexithorian would later describe in his official report as the most educationally traumatic experience in recorded military history. The educational trauma began when Pilot Flutterworth, emboldened by rum and fish stew, made the fatal mistake of asking what he considered an innocent question. "So what do you do for entertainment on this planet?" Santos and Grandma Beatrice exchanged the sort of look that should have immediately triggered every survival instinct the Zlothak possessed. Unfortunately, the Zlothak had evolved on a planet where the most dangerous predator was a creature roughly equivalent to an irritated hamster. So their survival instincts were calibrated for threats that squeaked rather than grinned. "Entertainment!" Santos's eyes lit up with the enthusiasm of someone about to share his favorite hobby. "Oh, we have wonderful entertainment. Show them, Beatrice." Grandma Beatrice disappeared into the back room and returned with what appeared to be a small viewing device. The screen flickered to life, showing humans engaged in what the translation matrix initially categorized as suicide attempts with style points. "This is called extreme sports," Santos explained cheerfully, as the screen showed a human throwing himself off a perfectly good cliff with nothing but a thin cord attached to his ankles. "Very popular. We also have surfing, where we ride on moving walls of water that could crush us to death." The next image showed a human balanced on a narrow board, sliding down the face of a wave that looked capable of swallowing small buildings. But why? Cloxanina's compound eyes were experiencing what could only be described as optical overload. Why would you deliberately place yourselves in mortal danger for no practical purpose? "For fun," Santos replied, as if this explained everything. "Look, here's rock climbing. We scale vertical stone faces using only our hands and feet and small metal implements." Vexithorian watched in horrified fascination as humans clung to cliff faces like particularly determined insects, apparently competing to see who could risk death in the most creative way. "And this," Grandma Beatrice added proudly, "is my grandson Ricardo. He does something called free running through the city. Watch him jump between buildings." The screen showed a young man leaping between rooftops with casual confidence, treating a fall that would result in immediate death as merely an inconvenience to be avoided through athletic prowess. "Your species has children who treat potentially fatal activities as recreational pastimes." Sub-Commander Grizzlethorpe's mobility tank was producing bubbles at an alarming rate, which in his species indicated either extreme stress or the underwater equivalent of hyperventilation. "Oh, that's nothing," Santos waved dismissively. "Wait until you see the Olympics. Every 4 years, we gather the best athletes from around the world to compete in who can run fastest, jump highest, and throw things farthest. Some of them even fight each other with swords, for sport." Technical specialist Quibbleton, whose truth cascade was evolving into what appeared to be a full existential crisis, stared at the screen in horror. "They've institutionalized competitive near-death experiences? Well, when you put it like that, it sounds dangerous," Santos admitted. "But we have safety equipment, usually, and medical teams standing by, most of the time. Most of the time. Sometimes the dangerous part is the whole point," Donna Beatriz explained patiently. "Like bullfighting. You face an angry bull with nothing but a red cloth and your wits. You have deliberately angry bulls?" Vexthorian's magnificent brain was beginning to emit small warning signals that suggested it was approaching maximum capacity for processing absurdity. "Oh yes, we raise them specifically to be as dangerous as possible. Then we provoke them and try not to get killed. Very exciting." The screen now showed a matador facing down a creature that outweighed him by several hundred pounds and possessed the sort of horns that evolution had clearly designed for impaling things. "But that's not even the really crazy stuff," Santos continued enthusiastically. "Show them the video of the running of the bulls." "No!" Vexithorian said quickly, holding up all 4 hands. I think we've seen enough entertainment for now." But Grandma Beatrice was already queuing up the next video. "This is from Pamplona. Every year, hundreds of people run through the streets while being chased by bulls. Look how happy they are." Indeed, the humans in the video appeared to be experiencing joy while being pursued by large, angry animals through narrow stone streets. Some were laughing. Several were taking photographs. One appeared to be having the time of his life, while a bull missed goring him by approximately 3 inches. "They're enjoying being hunted by predators," Cloxanina observed in a voice that suggested her worldview was undergoing rapid and possibly permanent alteration. "Bulls aren't really predators," Santos corrected. "They're herbivores. They just want to stomp us into pace because we annoy them. Completely different motivation." "That's worse," Grizzlethorpe bubbled frantically. "You've created recreational scenarios where peaceful creatures want to kill you." "Created?" Donna Beatriz laughed. Oh no! The bulls were already angry. We just gave them targets and made it into a festival, much more efficient. The casual way she discussed turning potential death into organized entertainment caused something fundamental to break in Vexithorian's understanding of how civilized species were supposed to behave. "Let me understand this correctly," he said slowly. "Your species voluntarily engages in activities that could result in death or serious injury. You've organized these activities into competitive events, and you consider this normal recreational behavior." Normal? Santos considered this. Well, I suppose it depends on your definition of normal. But yes, we do tend to find activities more interesting when there's a reasonable chance they might kill us. Adds excitement. And children participate in these activities. Oh, we start them young. Grandma Beatrice beamed proudly. My youngest granddaughter is only 8, and she's already learning to surf. Small waves, of course. We're not crazy. The statement hung in the air like a challenge.